Guten gardening, everybody. Well, today, as you can see, I am indoors. We're in our indoor growing space, and I want to provide you with a little bit of a tour as to what we have growing so far in our indoor garden here in Zone 5, Wisconsin. Now, I thought about how I would put this video together, and I thought maybe the best thing to do for those of you who've already seen my indoor space, or for those of you who are brand new to the space, is I'm going to reference a couple of videos here where we've already done some pretty in-depth tours and descriptions of the content as far as the different growing spaces, the different grow lights, etc. that we have. I'm going to give you video references to those, so I don't necessarily have to repeat all that we have here for our setup. But I am going to remind you of a couple of things. One, our indoor growing space is about 100 square feet, give or take a few. And we've been growing in our indoor grow space for the past 4 years. So this is year 4. This is the first year where we're going to have multiple green stalks in our indoor growing space. We did do some indoor green stalk growing last season. We actually took that green stalk outdoors. But this season we're going to have multiple green stalks growing in here. We're going to try to see how well they do in an indoor space. And I actually have some content coming up later on where we talk about maybe dealing with some of the challenges of watering a green stalk indoors, some suggestions around that, because that's a question that's actually come up quite a bit from our last seasons of growth. So I'm going to link a couple of videos in here in the description of this video so you can see descriptions of the grow lights, descriptions of the growing space in general. And instead of focusing in on that for the entirety of this video, I want to focus in on some of what's already growing. Now, you can see the green stalk here right beside me. We're going to start with what's growing in this green stalk and move on from there. All right, this first green stalk is an original 5-tier green stalk. So each of these tiers is 10 inches in depth. We could have brought in a leaf system, but we decided to go with this 5-tier because the bottom 2 tiers here are some of our store-bought red potatoes that we decided to keep going. These are the ones that we rescued last season. We grew outdoors quite successfully outdoors, I would say, but I dedicated only 2 tiers to the potatoes here. You can see they're coming along nicely. I would say most of them are about a foot, maybe 13 inches tall at this point. We've got those on our bottom tiers, and then directly above this, actually everything growing in here is a root crop vegetable. So here we have our sugar beets, and I did a multi-sowing for these. So you can see we've got, what, 4 here, 4 sugar beet plants. I tried to do 4 to 5 in each of the pockets here. And then directly above that, we have some of our Guten gardening radishes. And I say Guten gardening, which means that we've harvested these radishes over the last couple of seasons, just the radish seeds. And I went ahead and planted some of these in here. So these are our radishes. Really quick, really easy crop. These have been in here for a couple of weeks now, and you can see how nicely they're developing. They've got some of their true leaves on here. And then directly above that, we have some turnips. Now, turnips are a vegetable we actually haven't spent too much time growing here at Guten Gardening. And while I say we haven't grown very many of these in here, what I will tell you is that these turnips are from Guten Gardening. That means that a couple years ago when we did grow turnips, we got some of the seeds from those as well. So everything that's in here, every single one of these vegetables, these are root crops. Now, I did notice a couple of them. These are some of our beets here at the bottom. A couple of them seem to get a little bit leggy. And I'm trying my best to see what it's like to grow this green stalk, the entire thing, outside of our grow areas underneath just these bay lights. You can see they're fairly bright here. We're getting pretty good, pretty consistent lighting the whole way around, but I wanted to see if I could do well just with this standard bay lighting. So you can see we're experimenting around a little bit with the lighting here. This 6500K lights, these bay lights that we have, weren't all that expensive. We got 4 or 5 of them a couple of years back, and typically we've had our citrus in here. Well, our citrus is actually in our upstairs growing area this season to make a little bit more room for the vegetables that we need to grow. I've moved the table that was back here for a different purpose, but I'm not showing you that today. That's for a different experiment that's coming in the future. But we've given ourselves a little bit more space in this main area right outside of all of our grow areas, and so we're going to see if this lighting is enough or if we need to adjust that as we move forward. And I think actually these shorter, these quicker growing vegetables are a really good indicator or experiment for us there. Now I'm going to move from this over to what was on the ground behind it, which are some of our buckets of potatoes. Now we've got 15 or 16 different buckets that we got for free over the past season plus. And I took some more of our potatoes that we had left over, some of our store saved potatoes, and I put them in here to again try growing indoors. They did really well outdoors. If you haven't checked out that video where we did our bucket harvest outdoors, you really should. But I've got about 7 of these buckets in total of potatoes growing already. Now we hope those buckets produce well in here. Again, we'll see. We've got them in a couple of different places, experiencing a little bit different lighting. We'll find the sweet spot, I hope, here in our indoor growing area for those potatoes. Here we are at our indoor raised bed. I've done a couple of videos talking about how I built this. I've done a couple of videos talking about how I improved drainage for this and what that looks like. But in this bed, we've got a couple of different vegetables growing, and I'm hoping to see some production actually within the next couple of weeks based on what we have growing in here. Now this bed is about 9 square feet total in size, so it's not the biggest of bed, but for an indoor raised bed, we get some pretty good production out of here. Off to the right hand side, or my right hand side, we've got 3 potato plants in here. I didn't want to overwhelm this bed with potato plants because we got quite a bit of potato this summer. We still want to keep them growing so we can have some over the winter, some fresh ones growing still. But you can see right beside that we've got a plant supposed to be a really nice companion plant to potatoes, and that's some of our bush green beans. Green beans are a really common vegetable for our family, one we really love, and I actually grew some more green beans on this side. So again, these are bush green beans, which means we don't really need anything in the way of a pole, but even if we need to support them, off to the right-hand side here, I've got some trellising, and I'm going to use that trellising for 2 things. I'm going to use it for the green beans here as they get a little bit taller. You can see this one's kind of taken off right here. If I need to support it at all, I can support it over here. And then as our potatoes get bigger, if we need to support them as well, we can support them right up against the trellising here. And then down in the main part of the bed, we've got a couple of things that are just now coming up. Here we have a couple of our kohlrabi growing. You see the true leaves just starting to come out on our kohlrabi. We've got a couple of volunteer tomatoes. We had some tomatoes in here last season, and clearly they dropped some of their seeds. So we're going to have tomatoes in here. I probably have to transplant these because I don't actually remember or know what variety they are. And then right back here in the back, and there are a couple of them growing together, so I'll have to thin these out, but we've got some kale growing in here. This one's kind of hard to see. It's a purple. Here, I'll put my hand behind it so you can see it a little bit better. Some red Russian kale, and then this is just a standard lacinato kale right here. So we got some kale growing in here. Kale's a great plant to grow indoors. We found a lot of success with it. And these don't look the healthiest. I just actually transplanted these because they weren't looking so good in our initial sprouting area, but these are some bok choy. So I've got some bok choy coming in here as well. Again, they may not look the healthiest, but I think what's true about this is we get them into this nice bigger bed. I think we take care of them nicely under this light. They'll be just fine. In our seed starting area, we do have a couple of plants that I need to transplant over. We've got some beautiful Swiss chard coming in right here. It's a couple weeks old. These, I'm really excited to get into one of our green stalks. These are our Tiny Tim tomatoes, planted on November 23rd. These Tiny Tims, they only get about 14, 15 inches tall, but they produce a ton of cherry tomatoes. We got a bunch more of our kale coming along really nicely too. And right down in here, we have some more true potato seeds that we started. I've got one coming up now. These are purple Magic Molly true potato seeds. They're just now getting to a point where they're breaking through. Those true potato seeds can take weeks. Well, there's a good bit more that I could probably show you. We've got some strawberries growing in here as well, but I've got some other plans for those, and so I don't want to spoil everything at once. I've got some definitely cool experiments coming along this winter. Really, I've got a whole lot of content planned for you. I did want to mention one thing. You'll notice that we had quite a few potato and sweet potato videos over the last month plus, some from earlier harvests. And if you didn't understand why we were so excited about those videos and those harvests, You have to understand that last year I had to do a video where I talked about garden failures for the year, and one of our main failures was one of our main crops, and that was potatoes. So getting good results from our potatoes, getting good results from our sweet potatoes this season, I had to share it all. So I hope you enjoyed that content. If you haven't checked that content out, there's a whole bunch there for you from the last couple of months for you to enjoy. Well, we hope you enjoyed our indoor garden tour. It was a brief tour, but hey, we're getting going in here. We've got a lot planned this winter. We've got a lot of seeds to start. We've got a lot to grow. We've got a lot of decisions to make, and we got to talk about some of our rationale for those decisions as well. And all that's coming your way over the next couple of months. Well, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.